Rise, my apprentice.
The galaxy was on the brink of chaos. Far beyond the borders of the Galactic Republic, in the shadowed regions of the Outer Rim, the Mandalorian clan stirred. Once a fractured and divided people, they were now united under a single banner, the banner of Mandalore, the Ultimate. A leader of unparalleled charisma and strength, Mandalore sought to restore his people's former glory, to reclaim the mantle of the greatest warriors in the galaxy. For years, the Mandalorians had tested their might against lesser foes, subjugating worlds on the fringes of known space. Yet, for Mandalore the Ultimate, these victories were hollow. The true test of strength lay not in the subjugation of the weak, but in the conquest of the mighty. His eyes turned toward the Galactic Republic, a vast and prosperous civilization that had known peace for centuries. To Mandalore, the Republic represented the ultimate challenge, a worthy adversary that would either bring his people eternal glory or doom them to oblivion. In the shadow of this gathering storm, the Republic remained blissfully unaware of the impending danger. The Senate, bogged down by bureaucracy and complacency, failed to recognize the growing threat. Even the Jedi Order, guardians of peace and justice, saw little cause for concern. They believed the Mandalorians to be little more than marauders, unworthy of their attention. But not everyone was blind to the danger. On the remote world of Cathar, whispers of the Mandalorians' brutality began to spread. It was here that the first seeds of rebellion were sown, where a young Cathar warrior named Shaykoda swore vengeance for the atrocities committed against her people. Unknown to the galaxy at large, this vow would set in motion a series of events that would change the course of history. As the Mandalorians continued their advance, conquering world after world, the Republic could no longer ignore the threat. The Senate debated, argued, and stalled, even as reports of massacres and enslavement grew more frequent. The Republic's forces were spread thin, and its leaders were reluctant to commit to a full-scale war. It was in this moment of indecision that a lone voice began to rise within the Jedi Order. A Jedi Knight named Revan, known for his unorthodox methods and deep compassion for the suffering, refused to stand by and watch as the galaxy was torn apart. He called upon his fellow Jedi to take action, to stand against the Mandalorian threat and protect the innocent. Yet, the Jedi Council remained divided, hesitant to involve themselves in what they saw as a political conflict. The Outer Rim was burning. The Mandalorian clans, united under Mandalore the Ultimate, swept through the frontier worlds with a ferocity that sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Planet after planet fell before their onslaught, their populations enslaved or exterminated, and their cities reduced to smoldering ruins. The Republic's defenses crumbled in the face of this relentless advance, and panic began to spread among the systems that had long relied on the Republic's protection. Yet even as the galaxy began to tremble under the weight of the Mandalorian invasion, the Jedi Council remained resolute in their decision to abstain from the conflict. To the Council, the war was a political matter, one that did not require the intervention of the Jedi. They feared that by engaging in the war, the Jedi would be drawn closer to the dark side, repeating the mistakes of the Great Sith War. But there were those within the Jedi Order who could not stand by and watch as innocence suffered. Revan, a young and gifted Jedi Knight, was one of them. Revan had always been different from his peers, brilliant, charismatic, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. He had seen firsthand the devastation wrought by the Mandalorians, and he knew that the Republic would not survive without the aid of the Jedi. Gathering like-minded Jedi around him, Revan began to speak out against the Council's inaction. He called for intervention, for the Jedi to fulfill their duty as guardians of peace and protect the galaxy from the Mandalorian threat. His words resonated with many, particularly with his closest friend, Alec, who would later become known as Malak. Together, they formed the Revanchists, a faction of Jedi determined to join the fight against the Mandalorians. Despite the Council's disapproval, the Revanchists grew in number, drawing in Jedi from across the galaxy who shared Revan's vision. They became a symbol of hope for those who believed the Republic could still be saved. Revan himself became a rallying figure, his courage and conviction inspiring soldiers and Jedi alike. As the Revanchists prepared to enter the fray, the Mandalorians struck a blow that would echo throughout the galaxy: the massacre of Cathar. Cathar was a peaceful world, home to the Cathar species, a proud and noble people known for their honor and bravery. When the Mandalorians arrived, they offered the Cathar a choice: surrender and join their ranks, or face annihilation. The Cathar chose to fight. The battle was brief and brutal. The Cathar were overwhelmed, their warriors no match for the Mandalorian war machine. But the Mandalorians were not satisfied with victory. Mandalore the Ultimate, in an act of sheer cruelty, ordered the complete extermination of the Cathar people. Men, women, and children were slaughtered without mercy, their cities razed to the ground. Those who survived the initial assault were hunted down and killed. The beaches of Cathar ran red with blood, and the planet was left a desolate wasteland. The massacre of Cathar shocked the galaxy. News of the atrocity spread like wildfire, igniting outrage and fear. It was the final straw for many within the Republic, and even the Jedi Council could no longer ignore the threat. But for Revan, it was a turning point. Standing on the blood-soaked sands of Cathar, Revan swore that he would not rest until the Mandalorians were defeated, no matter the cost. The Revanchists officially joined the war, bringing with them the full might of the Jedi who had chosen to follow Revan. They were met with cheers and hope by the beleaguered Republic forces, who now saw a glimmer of light in the darkness. But for Revan, the war was no longer just a battle against the Mandalorians. It was a crusade to avenge the innocent lives lost on Cathar. The Republic was no longer fighting alone. With the arrival of the Revanchists, the tide of the war began to shift, albeit slowly. Revan, now the de facto leader of the Republic's military efforts, wasted no time in taking command. He was a natural strategist, able to see patterns in chaos, and he quickly identified the weaknesses in the Mandalorian lines. Under Revan's leadership, the Republic launched a series of counter-offensives, striking at key Mandalorian positions in the Outer Rim. The Mandalorians, caught off guard by the sudden resurgence of the Republic, were forced to retreat from several of their conquests. However, the war was far from won. The Mandalorians were resilient, their warriors driven by a thirst for glory that no defeat could quench. One of the first major engagements under Revan's command was the Battle of Duxon. Duxon, a moon orbiting the planet Onderon, had become a key stronghold for the Mandalorians. Its dense jungles and treacherous terrain made it a natural fortress, and from there, the Mandalorians launched raids against the Republic and Onderon itself. Revan knew that taking Duxon would be no easy task. The Mandalorians were well entrenched, and the Republic forces were wary of the moon's many dangers. But Revan was determined to make Duxon the site of one of the Republic's first major victories. He devised a plan that was as audacious as it was risky. Instead of a full frontal assault, Revan chose to deploy small, specialized strike teams to infiltrate the Mandalorian positions. These teams, composed of elite Republic soldiers and Jedi, were tasked with sabotaging the Mandalorian defenses from within, creating chaos and confusion before the main Republic force launched their attack. Alec, now known as Malak, was among those leading the strike teams. He had become Revan's most trusted lieutenant, and his loyalty to his friend was absolute. Together, they had faced countless battles, and Malak knew that Revan's plan, though dangerous, was their best chance at victory. As the strike teams infiltrated the Mandalorian positions, the jungles of Duxon became a battlefield unlike any other. The Mandalorians, though taken by surprise, fought back fiercely. The fighting was brutal and close quarters, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But the Republic forces, driven by Revan's leadership and the desire to protect their homeworlds, pressed on. The turning point came when Malak's team managed to disable the Mandalorians' primary communication hub. Cut off from one another, the Mandalorian forces became disorganized, allowing the Republic troops to exploit their confusion. With the defenses in disarray, Revan ordered the full assault, and the Republic fleet descended upon Duxon with overwhelming force. The Battle of Duxon raged for days, with neither side willing to concede defeat, but in the end, it was Revan's strategy that prevailed. The Mandalorians were forced to retreat, abandoning Duxon to the Republic. It was a hard-won victory, but it was a victory nonetheless, and it marked the first significant defeat of the Mandalorians in the war. The Republic soldiers, weary from battle, celebrated their triumph. But for Revan and the Revanchists, the victory was bittersweet. They knew that the war was far from over, and that the Mandalorians would not take their defeat lightly. The Battle of Duxon had shown them the strength of their enemy, and the road to ultimate victory would be long and filled with peril. As Revan stood on the war-torn surface of Duxon, looking out over the battlefield, he felt a sense of determination harden within him. The war had only just begun, and he would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The victory at Duxon had breathed new life into the Republic's war effort. Buoyed by their success, Republic forces began to reclaim territories lost to the Mandalorians. But the Mandalorians were not easily dissuaded. They regrouped and intensified their efforts, determined to crush the Republic's resolve. Their next target was the Ecumenopolis of Terris, a sprawling city world that stood as a symbol of the Republic's wealth and influence in the Outer Rim. Terris was a crucial strategic location, with its towering skyscrapers and bustling spaceports serving as a key hub for trade and military logistics. The Mandalorians Mandalorians, under the direct command of Mandalore the Ultimate, saw Taris as the perfect target to demoralize the Republic and cut off its supply lines. A successful siege of Taris would not only weaken the Republic's war effort, but also send a message to the galaxy that the Mandalorians could strike at the heart of the Republic's power. The Republic, aware of Taris' importance, fortified the planet with everything they had. The planet's defenses were formidable, with planetary shields, orbital defense platforms, and a substantial fleet stationed in the system. However, the Mandalorians, masters of warfare, had prepared for this. They launched a massive, coordinated assault that caught the Republic forces off guard, overwhelming the outer defenses and blockading the planet. The Siege of Taris began with a brutal space battle. Mandalorian warships, bristling with weapons, engaged the Republic fleet in a relentless assault. Despite their superior numbers, the Republic fleet struggled to hold the line against the Mandalorian onslaught. The Mandalorians, using their characteristic hit-and-run tactics, targeted the Republic's command ships, leaving the fleet disorganized and vulnerable. As the Republic fleet faltered, the Mandalorians moved to the next phase of their plan. They launched ground assaults on key locations across Taris, targeting military installations, communication hubs, and supply depots. The city world, once vibrant and bustling, became a battlefield. The Mandalorians showed no mercy, cutting through Republic forces with brutal efficiency. Amid the chaos, Revan and the Revanchists arrived on Taris. Revan immediately took command, rallying the beleaguered Republic troops and organizing the planet's defenses. His presence on the battlefield was a turning point for the Republic. Revan's strategic mind and unyielding determination gave the Republic forces the edge they desperately needed. Revan quickly assessed the situation and devised a plan to break the Mandalorian siege. Knowing that a prolonged battle would only favor the Mandalorians, who thrived in drawn-out conflicts, Revan opted for a bold and risky strategy. He would lead a daring counteroffensive to strike directly at the heart of the Mandalorian forces, targeting their command centers and supply lines. The battle that followed was one of the most intense of the Mandalorian Wars. Revan, fighting alongside his troops, led the charge into the most dangerous parts of the city. His leadership and tactical brilliance turned the tide of battle as the Republic forces began to push back the Mandalorians. The Revanchists, inspired by Revan's resolve, fought with a ferocity that matched even the Mandalorians. One of the key moments of the siege came when Revan personally led a strike team into the Mandalorian command center, located in the depths of Taris' undercity. The mission was perilous, with Mandalorian warriors guarding every entrance. But Revan, guided by the Force, managed to infiltrate the command center and disrupt the Mandalorian leadership, causing chaos among their ranks. With their command structure in disarray, the Mandalorian forces began to falter. The Republic, seizing the opportunity, launched a full-scale counterattack that broke the siege. The Mandalorians, now on the defensive, were forced to retreat from Taris, leaving behind a planet scarred by war but still standing. The siege of Taris was a costly victory for the Republic, with much of the planet lying in ruins. But it was a victory nonetheless, and it solidified Revan's reputation as a military genius and a hero of the Republic. His successes on Taris and Duxon had not only saved countless lives, but also demonstrated that the Mandalorians were not invincible. However, as Revan stood among the wreckage of Taris, he couldn't shake the feeling that the war was changing him. The decisions he had to make, the lives lost under his command, and the sheer brutality of the Mandalorians were beginning to take a toll on him. The line between light and dark, once so clear to him, was becoming blurred. But Revan pushed these thoughts aside. The war was far from over, and the Republic needed him. He vowed to see the Mandalorians defeated, no matter what it took. And so, Revan's ascendancy continued, as he led the Republic into the next phase of the war, one that would bring them closer to victory, but also closer to the edge of darkness. The Republic's victories at Duxon and Taris had begun to turn the tide of the war, but the Mandalorians were far from defeated. Driven by their warrior code and the leadership of Mandalore the Ultimate, they regrouped and prepared for a final, decisive confrontation. Both sides knew that the next battle could determine the fate of the galaxy. Revan, now the undisputed leader of the Republic's forces, had become increasingly driven and increasingly ruthless. The war had hardened him, and his strategies, once bold and calculated, now bordered on the extreme. He was willing to do whatever it took to end the Mandalorian threat, even if it meant crossing lines that other Jedi would never consider. Revan's focus turned to Malachor 5, a remote planet steeped in dark history. Malachor was a world shrouded in the dark side of the Force, its surface scarred by ancient conflicts and cursed with a malevolent energy that twisted and corrupted all who lingered there. The Mandalorians had chosen Malachor 5 as their final stronghold, believing that the planet's dark power would give them an advantage over the Republic. Revan saw Malachor 5 as the key to ending the war once and for all. He devised a plan that was as audacious as it was deadly, a plan that would not only defeat the Mandalorians, but would also serve as a warning to any who dared to challenge the Republic in the future. The battle began with the Republic fleet descending upon Malachor V. The Mandalorians, prepared for the assault, met them with fierce resistance. The skies above Malachor became a chaotic battlefield as starfighters clashed, capital ships exchanged devastating volleys, and the very fabric of space seemed to tremble under the intensity of the conflict. But the true horror of Malachor V lay not in the skies, but on the ground. Revan had brought with him a secret weapon, an ancient, devastating superweapon known as the Mass Shadow Generator. The device, designed by a brilliant but morally conflicted Republic scientist, had the power to create a massive gravity well capable of crushing entire fleets and laying waste to planets. As the battle raged on, Revan ordered the deployment of the Mass Shadow Generator. The Republic forces on the surface, led by Revan's trusted general, Mitra Surik, were instructed to hold the line against the Mandalorians while the weapon was prepared. Surik, who had fought alongside Revan in many battles, trusted her leader implicitly, but she could sense the growing darkness within him. When the Mass Shadow Generator was activated, the effect was immediate and cataclysmic. A gravitational shockwave rippled across Malachor V, pulling ships from the sky and slamming them into the ground. Entire fleets were torn apart, their fragments scattered across the planet's surface. The Mandalorian forces were obliterated in an instant, their warships crushed and their warriors vaporized. But the devastation did not end there. The Republic forces caught in the blast were also annihilated, including many of Revan's most loyal soldiers. The surface of Malachor V cracked and shattered, its already unstable terrain transformed into a nightmarish landscape of jagged chasms and swirling dark energy. The planet, once a stronghold of the Mandalorians, had become a graveyard. The Battle of Malachor V was over, and the Mandalorian Wars were won, but the cost of victory was immense. The Republic had lost countless lives, and the toll on those who survived was immeasurable. Mitra Surik, standing amid the ruins, felt a profound emptiness as she surveyed the aftermath. The destruction she had witnessed severed her connection to the Force, leaving her a hollow shell of her former self, a condition that would later earn her the title of the Jedi Exile. As for Revan, he emerged from the battle victorious but changed. The dark power of Malachor V, combined with the atrocities he had committed in the name of victory, had left a deep mark on him. He had sacrificed much in his pursuit of peace, and in doing so, he had strayed far from the ideals of the Jedi. In the days that followed, Revan learned the full extent of Mandalore the Ultimate's plan. The Mandalorians had been manipulated by a hidden Sith influence, their entire war effort designed to weaken the Republic and the Jedi. Revan, realizing the threat that still loomed in the shadows, knew that the fight was far from over. The Mandalorian Wars were but a prelude to a greater conflict, a conflict that would see Revan walk a path into the darkness from which there might be no return. The galaxy was silent in the wake of the Mandalorian Wars, a silence that belied the deep scars left by the conflict. The Republic, though victorious, was left to pick up the pieces of a fractured and war-torn galaxy. Entire worlds lay in ruin, their populations decimated, and the Republic's military was severely weakened by the years of relentless warfare. The Jedi Order, once seen as the guardians of peace, was now viewed with suspicion and mistrust by many in the Republic. The involvement of the revanchists and the increasingly extreme measures they took under Revan's command had strained the relationship between the Jedi and the Senate. The Jedi Council too was divided, struggling to reconcile the actions of Revan and his followers with the principles of the Order. For the Mandalorians, the war had been a catastrophe. With their leader, Mandalore the Ultimate, dead and their forces shattered, the once proud warrior clans were scattered across the galaxy. Many Mandalorians turned to mercenary work or hid in exile, while others sought to rebuild their culture in the shadows, awaiting the day when they could reclaim their honor. But it was Revan who bore the heaviest burden. The war had changed him in ways he could not have imagined. The horrors of Malachor V, the deaths of countless soldiers and civilians, and the revelation of the Sith's manipulation weighed heavily on his conscience. He had done what he believed was necessary to end the war, but at what cost? Determined to prevent the Sith from taking advantage of the Republic's weakened state, Revan and his closest ally, Malak, embarked on a journey to the unknown regions. There, they sought to uncover the truth behind the Sith's influence and to eliminate the threat before it could strike again. But the dark power that had tainted Malachor V continued to haunt Revan, pulling him deeper into the shadows. In the unknown regions, Revan and Malak encountered the remnants of the ancient Sith Empire, a civilization that had survived in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Sith, recognizing Revan's strength and potential, sought to turn him to their cause, and so the hero of the Republic became its greatest threat. Revan and Malak, once Jedi Knights, returned to the galaxy as Sith Lords. They declared themselves the new rulers of the Sith and launched a devastating campaign against the Republic, seeking to rebuild the galaxy in their own image. This conflict, known as the Jedi Civil War, would plunge the galaxy into chaos once more, as former allies became bitter enemies. The Republic, already weakened by the Mandalorian Wars, was ill-prepared to face the might of Revan's Sith Empire. The Jedi Order, too, found itself divided, with many questioning how one of their own could have fallen so far. The galaxy teetered on the brink of destruction as the forces of light and darkness clashed in a war that would determine the fate of all. Yet, even as the Jedi Civil War raged on, there were those who still remembered Revan as the hero who had saved the Republic from the Mandalorians. They whispered of redemption, of a way to bring Revan back from the darkness. But whether Revan could be saved, or whether he even wanted to be, remained uncertain. In the end, the legacy of the Mandalorian Wars was one of both triumph and tragedy. It was a conflict that had shaped the galaxy in ways that few could have foreseen, setting the stage for future battles and forging legends that would be remembered for millennia. But it was also a reminder of the thin line between heroism and villainy, and the price of victory in a galaxy where the Force could lead even the brightest stars into the deepest shadows.